Leadership is not about titles, status, and wielding power. A leader is anyone who takes responsibility for recognizing the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. Think about that for a second. How many of us have spent our entire careers building up a thick layer of professional armor? We walk into the office or jump on a Zoom call feeling like we have to have all the answers, never show fear, and definitely never admit when we're overwhelmed. We've been taught that vulnerability is a liability. But according to Dr. Brené Brown, that armor is actually the very thing stopping us from being the leaders we were meant to be. Today, we are diving deep into Dare to Lead. Brené isn't just a motivational speaker, she's a research professor who has spent 20 years studying the uncomfortable stuff, shame, fear, and vulnerability. She took all that data and realized that the future of leadership isn't about brawn, it's about heart. By the end of this summary, you're going to have a toolkit to move from armored leadership to daring leadership. You'll learn how to build massive trust, stay grounded when things go sideways, and finally stop carrying that 20-ton shield of perfectionism. Let's step into the arena and break down these 4 pillars, chapter by chapter. Part 1, Rumbling with Vulnerability. This is the foundation. If you don't master the rumble, the rest of the book is just nice to have advice. A rumble is Brené's word for a conversation, meeting, or decision characterized by a commitment to lean into vulnerability, stay curious, and stick with the messy middle of problem solving. Chapter 1, The Moment and the Myth. The book opens by shattering the greatest lie in corporate history, that vulnerability is weakness. Brené issued a challenge to thousands of military leaders, CEOs, and athletes. Give me one example of courage you've witnessed that did not require uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. The silence was deafening. You cannot have courage without vulnerability. This chapter teaches us that if we aren't willing to fail or look a bit unpolished, we can't innovate. Innovation requires trying things that might not work. In a real-world setting, think about the leader who sits in a meeting and says, "I don't know the answer to this, but I'm committed to helping us find it." That feels naked, right? But that honesty creates a safe space for everyone else to stop pretending and start solving. Daring leadership starts with the realization that you can't get to the gold without walking through the dirt. Chapter 2, The Call to Courage. In Chapter 2, Brené identifies the greatest barrier to daring leadership. It's not fear, it's our armor. When we are afraid, we don't just feel it, we protect ourselves. We use sarcasm, we micromanage, or we become know-it-alls. The call to courage is about choosing to take that armor off. Brené shares a story about how shame often drives our need to be right rather than to get it right. If a project fails and your first instinct is to find someone to blame, you are wearing armor. A daring leader pauses and asks, "What was my part in this?" This chapter shifts the focus from self-protection to self-awareness. It's a call to move from being a knower to being a learner. Learners are curious, knowers are defensive. Which one do you want to be when the pressure is on? Chapter 3, The Armory. This is a heavy-hitting chapter where Brené lists the 16 behaviors that make up our armory. The most toxic one? Perfectionism. We often wear perfectionism like a badge of honor, but Brené reveals it's actually a shield. It's the belief that if I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. But perfectionism is a trap because it's unattainable. In this chapter, we learn to trade perfectionism for healthy striving. Another piece of armor is foreboding joy, that feeling when things are going so well you start waiting for the other shoe to drop. Daring leaders practice gratitude instead. They realize that joy is the most vulnerable emotion we experience. If you're constantly bracing for the worst, you can't lead your team toward the best. This chapter is a mirror. It asks you to look at how you hide your true self to stay safe. Chapter 4, Shame and Empathy. Shame is the silent killer of organizations. It's that feeling of "I am a mistake" rather than "I made a mistake." If your workplace culture uses shame, like public call-outs or joking at someone's expense, innovation will die. Why? Because no one will take a risk if they think they'll be humiliated for failing. The antidote to shame is empathy. Breen breaks down the 5 elements of empathy, emphasizing that it's not about having the right words. It's about being with someone in their struggle. She tells a story about a leader whose employee lost a family member. Instead of a clinical "sorry for your loss" email, the leader sat with the employee and said, "I don't even know what to say, but I'm so glad you told me." That's empathy. It's a tool that builds a shame-resilient culture where people feel seen and supported, which ironically makes them work much harder and more creatively. Chapter 5: Curiosity and Grounded Confidence. The final chapter of this section introduces grounded confidence. This isn't the fake it till you make it kind of confidence. It's the confidence that comes from having rumbled through hard things before. It's built through curiosity. Breen explains that when we are in a high-stress meeting, our brains want to close the loop and find a solution immediately to stop the discomfort. Daring leaders resist that urge. They stay in the messy middle longer. They ask, "What am I missing here?" or "Tell me more about how you see this." This chapter provides a curiosity lab approach. Treat every problem as an experiment. When you are curious, you aren't defensive. You are grounded in the facts and the potential for a solution, rather than the fear of looking incompetent. This is how you build a team that isn't afraid to tackle the impossible problems. Part 2: Living into our values. Now that the armor is down, what takes its place? Your values. But Breen argues that most people don't actually live their values, they just profess them. Chapter 6: Clarity of Values. Most of us have a list of 10 or 20 things we value: honesty, hard work, family, etc. Breen says that's too many. If you have more than 2 core values, you don't have any. Why? Because when things get really tough, you need a filter that is razor sharp. In this chapter, she tasks us with narrowing it down to just 2. For example, if your values are courage and equality, every decision you make, who you hire, how you spend money, how you handle a conflict, must be filtered through those 2 words. She shares a story about a company that valued safety but ignored a manager who was a brilliant jerk because he brought in money. That's not living a value, that's a slogan. This chapter challenges you to find your North Star so that when the arena gets dark, you know exactly which way to turn. Chapter 7: Taking the Seat. Values are useless if they don't have legs. Chapter 7 is about operationalizing values. This means turning an abstract word into a specific behavior. If your value is respect, what does that look like when you're angry? Does it mean you don't interrupt? Does it mean you don't send emails after 8 p.m.? Daring leaders define these behaviors for their teams. Breen discusses the importance of feedback as a value. If you value growth, you must be willing to sit in the seat and have the hard conversation. She gives us a checklist for engaged feedback, including the "I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you" mindset. This chapter is about moving from talking the talk to walking the walk, ensuring that your team knows exactly what is expected of them, not just in their tasks, but in their soul. Part 3: Braving Trust. Trust is the most important asset in any relationship, yet we treat it like a vague feeling. Breen breaks it down into an inventory called Braving. Chapter 8: The Inventory, Braving. This is perhaps the most practical chapter in the book. Trust is built in tiny, sliding door moments. Breen uses the Braving acronym to give us a language for trust. Boundaries. You are clear about what is okay and what is not. Reliability. You do what you say you'll do. Accountability. You own your mistakes and make amends. Vault. You don't share information that isn't yours to share. Integrity. Choosing courage over comfort. Non-judgment. We can both struggle and ask for help. Generosity. Assuming the most generous contribution from others. The real-life lesson here is that you can use this inventory to fix broken relationships. Instead of saying, "I don't trust you," which feels like a character attack, you can say, "I'm struggling with the vault piece of our relationship. I felt hurt when you shared my private news with the team." It turns a vague conflict into a solvable problem. This chapter proves that trust is a slow-growing garden, not a light switch. Part 4: Learning to Rise. If you are brave enough, often enough, you are going to fall. This section is about the resilience piece of leadership. Chapter 9: The Reckoning. When we fall, maybe a product fails or we get a bad performance review, our brains immediately try to make sense of the pain. We create a shitty first draft, SFD. This is the story we tell ourselves: my boss hates me, or I'm a total failure. The reckoning is the moment you realize you're hooked by a story. You feel your heart racing or your face getting hot. Daring leaders learn to catch themselves in the SFD. Brené emphasizes that we are meaning-making machines, but the stories we make up are usually wrong and rooted in fear. This chapter teaches you to pause and say, the story I'm telling myself right now is. This simple phrase gives you the distance you need to stay in control of your emotions rather than being a slave to them. Chapter 10, The Rumble and the Revolution. The final chapter is where the revolution happens. Once you've written your SFD, you have to rumble with it. You ask, what are the facts? What do I need to learn? What more do I need to understand about the people involved? Brené tells a story about a misunderstanding with her husband where her SFD was that he didn't care about her. When she rumbled with the story, she realized the fact was simply that he was tired. By owning our stories of failure, we get to write the ending. If we run from our failures, they end up defining us. This is the heart of rising strong. A leader who knows how to get back up is a leader who can take risks. The revolution is the realization that being all in is the only way to live and lead, even if it means getting some arena dust on your face. Brené Brown's work is a powerful reminder that the soft skills of leadership are actually the hardest skills to master. It takes no courage to be a cynic or a critic. It takes immense courage to show up, be seen, and lead with an open heart. But enough about what Brené thinks. I want to hear from you. Which of the braving elements do you think is the missing link in your current team or relationship? Is it the vault? Reliability? Let's start a conversation in the comments below. If this deep dive gave you some value today, please hit that like button and subscribe to BloomShelf Hub. Here at the Hub, we believe that one great book can change the trajectory of your life. We're here to summarize the best ideas so you can spend less time searching and more time blooming. Stay tuned for our next summary, and until then, stay curious, stay brave, and keep leading.